Mythos Busters, investigating the mystery, monsters, and madness of Arkham Horror, the card game.
Hello, and welcome to episode 120 of Mythos Busters. I'm Sean, and joining me on this lovely Monday morning is the full crew. We're all here, guys. First, there's Nick. Hey, Nick.
Hello.
How you doing?
I am well. How are you?
I'm fantastic, which is not something I often say on Monday mornings. I am an office meme, and I hate my life for it, so it's fine. Joining us as well is Ian. Hey, Ian.
Oh, hello.
Have you brought all systems online yet?
Oh, definitely not. Everything is a mistake right now. It's way too early for me.
I say Monday morning, and Ian's like, yeah. But for me, it's Monday morning.
Yeah, I still feel like I'm in Sunday. We keep joking before the cast started about how my brain's not functioning properly, and you all were talking about 30 Rock, and it took me a good few minutes to realize you guys weren't talking about Third Rock from the Sun, which is a completely different show. So, yeah, that's where I'm at.
But still a great show.
I
Sure.
was about to say, don't get Nick started on that one. 30 Rock from the Sun. Yeah, and joining as well is, of course, Scott. Hey, Scott.
Oh, good morning.
How's it going?
Oh, it's pretty good. Just some car troubles this morning. It's a little cold here. It's minus 36. So one of my vehicles didn't start. The one we're taking to my parents' house today. But
maybe.
Yeah. Hard question.
Yeah. Every time you throw out a cold temperature, I always have to double check, and it turns out at negative 36, we're pretty close. That's obviously that's cold, but it's like 32 Fahrenheit, negative 32 Fahrenheit.
Yeah, minus 40 is where they line up. So the closer we get to 40, and we're gonna pass 40 next week. So
lucky us.
Yeah.
Well, we've got a fun episode lined up for you guys. We got some catch up and some news to get to, and then the meat of discussion tonight is going to be on a voicemail. We're going to talk a little bit about the idea and the application of power creep in Arkham Horror and how we feel the game's doing in that regard. And then, of course, we'll round it out with some tentacle time. But first, just a couple things to catch up on. So our 2021 meme contest is completed. We've done the meme stream. We were joined by both MJ and Jeremy. It was a hoot. It was a laugh riot. It was a party. And that's up on.
It was a hoot and a half.
A hoot and a half. Yeah, I think we cleared the halfway part on the next hoot. So that's up on YouTube and Twitch, so feel free to go check that out. Congrats to the winners, and thanks to everyone who tossed us memes, because that was just a joy to go through. Y'all are hilarious.
One of the best prizes, I think, was MJ throwing up one of her copies of the investigator cards and saying she would open it up and sign or doodle on a few cards. And I'm going to share what the winner requested, that he wants her to write "Hammer Time" on the sledgehammer and the Cyclopean hammer.
Yes.
The Cyclopean thing.
Love it.
So
stop.
Great pick there.
Hammer Time.
Hammer Time.
Fantastic. Yeah, so go check that out. As always, the meme stream is a really good time. Scott, BusterCon, it's happening.
Yeah, apparently we're doing a thing. So the dates are May 12th through 15th, 2022. It will be at FFZ, or the Game Center, but we call it FFZ, in Roseville, Minnesota. If you don't know where the FFZ is, it's the old game set, the FFG place. If you've been to any Arkham Knights, it's the same building, just brand new name. We have a hotel block reserved at the Hilton Doubletree, just approximately 2 soccer ball kicks away, but I'm now learning that I may have incorrectly guessed that.
Oh no.
It might be slightly more than 2.
No, double down. Don't back off. Double down.
If we get one of the Minnesota professional soccer guys out, maybe 2 kicks, but for us amateurs, so 2 professional soccer ball kicks away. Anyways, $122 a night, regardless of the number of people in the room. You can get a king bed or 2 queens, or 5 people and a king. See how it goes. Breakfast included. You can either call them, or you can. We have a link in the show notes. If you do call them, just mention BusterCon and you'll get the deal. We are doing the Dream Eaters Iron Man at BusterCon 2022, and we are currently making the schedule come together. We are trying to pack this thing full. For sure, Sunday will be Dead CCG Day because I'll be playing Dead CCGs. That is one thing that is for
that will
sure.
happen. That will
Yeah.
happen.
So
Sunday
Iron Man-
is free. Sunday is free play day, which means we
Yeah.
will all be playing Dead CCGs.
Yeah. So Iron Man Saturday, a bunch of stuff Thursday and Friday, and then Sunday is going to be casual. We'll still have stuff planned. I plan to have some Arkham planned stuff, but that's when we're going to bust
That's
out
cute.
Star Wars CCG.
Yeah, I thought you were going to play Dead CCGs that day.
Well, I said we're going to have other things planned for those who don't want to play Dead CCGs.
Who though?
I don't know.
Yeah, who?
Crazy people.
Fantastic. I'm trying to see who asked it here. Psychopath in chat asked if we have any Omicron contingencies for BusterCon, which is a good question. It's obviously something we're looking at.
So I talked to the hotel, so you can cancel up to 2 days in advance. On the Monday, and we start on Tuesday, and we start on a Thursday. So, anyways, you can cancel 2 days before your hotel reservation starts. And we've talked to FFZ, and Christian Peterson's awesome. So he's like, if this stuff goes awry, we don't lose our deposit or anything like that. He's like, we can just move the dates. So it does throw a wrench in the system for people like me who had to, buy international plane tickets. But that is the contingency, is that we can move it slightly if we need to, or move it grossly if we need to, from the podcast end. So hopefully, hopefully we're in a lull. Oh God, we'll see. And we're discussing, I think, masking and vaccine stuff too, because that's going to be important to a lot of people who show up. So,
Yep.
yeah.
So pay attention for more official announcements in that regard in the coming days.
Yeah. Network. If it goes awry, he says, as if it hasn't been tits up for 18 months already. Yeah. Too real.
Boy. Sure seems like we haven't learned a whole lot in those 18 months, though.
It's actually 21 months now. So no one's counting, but
All right. So another announcement is we've had a couple people ask about it, and the Dissonant Voices installment for Edge of the Earth is underway. I don't have official announcement on when those are going to be up on YouTube and then over to the Arkham Cards app, but it is underway. So hopefully the next time you guys start up an Edge campaign, depending on when that is, we'll have that ready for you. And of course, DV is available to any of our patrons at any of the patron levels. So go check that out. Patreon.com/MythosBusters. All right, guys, let's check in. What Arkham have you been playing over the busy holidays where clearly everyone had time to play Arkham? I'll go first.
Well, that silence speaks for itself.
Normally you pick someone, but yeah, all right, go ahead.
Yeah, that is true. Normally I direct it. That's on me. I have a Lola and Mark Edge of the Earth campaign that I'm partway through. I have a Lola build that I'm pretty okay with. I'm not going to talk about Lola at length because I tend to piss people off no matter which way I go with it. But I do enjoy the Lola deck I've got going on. It's a accessory slot mayhem with Ellie as Splash, and I've just got a bunch of relics that play out. I've got the lower level red clock, which I've found to be amazing in Lola. Since it's a forced ability, you don't have to worry about being in rogue class in order to hit that ability, which is pretty cool. And even at the lower level, I find that's a really cool little item to just like toss out, and it just does its thing. It's right. The clock is correct. It's pretty great. And then Mark, I'm just running pretty standard Colt gunslinger stuff because we talked about it last time, and I'm like, I haven't run that deck since Carcosa, so here we are. it's going pretty okay. I've had a couple rough scenarios, but that's Edge for you. So having a pretty good time with that. And then as well, I finally got my wife, who is a little bit reluctant to pick up the heavier games that I put in front of her sometimes. So I haven't gotten her to play a whole lot of Arkham since it came out. But I've got her and my daughter playing an Innsmouth campaign. It is, let's see here, who are we playing? I've got Akachi, my wife's got Winnie, and my daughter has Harvey. And it's been really fun so far. And also I've learned that my daughter just loves the act of drawing cards. Who knew? She's just loving Harvey. It's pretty great.
Very fair.
Yep.
It's like that meme. Is she interested in the game or draw 25?
Yes. Scott, what you been playing?
I think since the last time we recorded, I played exactly one game. And it was based on Nick, our conversation regarding Solo. Oh my god, I forget his name. Bob, thank you. And stupid me, I'm like, I wonder how well Bob can do in like Solo Carnival.
That is such a Scott thought.
I know, but I was like, I haven't played Carnival in a while, and I think it's a pretty good test because it kind of hits a bunch of notes, and it didn't go great. I did spawn Ithaqua, I think it is. Anyways, the big beast.
Kindanaqua. Kindanaqua.
Okay. Shanathwa?
Nindathqua.
Yeah, that one. Got in the boat and promptly died. So, but I also think that Solo Carnival is just a really tough go anyways. Yeah, I'm not sure.
Depends on the gator, but yeah, Bob is not particularly suited, I think, to tackle Carnival solo.
Yeah. So, it was an interesting thought experiment, or just a full-on experiment. But I do think he's a decent solo investigator in general. I don't know if he's my favorite, but little bit of action economy he gets does help. So,
excellent. He and Jack are the two that I've yet to play out of the Edge box, so they're going to be my next two-handed campaign. It'll be interesting.
Are you going to put them together?
That's my thought.
Ooh.
It's going to be interesting.
Yeah, sounds fun.
Yeah. Ian, what you been playing?
Well, speaking of Jack, I missed last episode, so it feels like it's been a billion years since I talked about what I played, and then I pulled up Arkham DB to see what I've been playing, and it's not that long a list. So, fortunately, I haven't been playing a ton of Arkham, but I did finish my first campaign of Edge of the Earth a couple weeks ago with Monterey Jack solo. I usually do kind of take the rogue of a box and do a solo run as kind of the initial face check run of a new campaign. Although when I did that with Trish last time around with Innsmouth, listeners will remember that it did not go so well. But I'm happy to say Monterey Jack has done a lot better, and I'm vibing with Monterey Jack a lot faster than I did with Trish. But I mean, I feel like anyone is going to vibe with Monterey Jack because he's just kind of ridiculous. At least in my opinion, I don't know. Someone can let me know if he's not quite working for them. But just that combination of, I don't think it's anything particularly special for Monterey Jack other than just kind of shoving a bunch of movement stuff in his deck. So I think I'm kind of looking at his ending rig and, double Pathfinder, which I was often able to get both out. Yeah, it was nasty. Hiking Boots was really good. One of the new Edge cards. What else did I have? I think I started out with Shortcut and cut it out. I cut out the Shortcut.
Man, I have to say, Jack, Justin played Jack through the last two campaigns that we played, which were the expedition campaigns. We did TFA, and then we hopped into Edge. And he just freaking carried me the entire campaign. He can do so much across the map. It's insane.
Yeah, totally. And just I guess he does. He's one of those investigators who does affect how you build your deck a little bit, just because you know you're going to be drawing through your deck pretty fast. So you can do things like just throw in one copy of a certain card and still be pretty sure you're going to find it. So yeah, he's just really strong. Still does a lot of the stuff that I like doing, though, like 5 agility and being able to evade really easily. And my initial face check campaigns of runs of campaigns usually don't go that well, because it turns out when you don't know what a campaign's gonna do, it makes it harder. I don't know if you that amazing revelation to you all, but
Hot take.
yeah. But I think it's a testament to Monterey Jack that although I probably could do better now that I know what Edge of the Earth does, he still was able to win the campaign and get a nice clean win. So other than that, I think I've been running Leo and Norman as a duo through a few standalones, just trying out some stuff. I haven't played Leo in super long, and turns out he's for whatever reason, I'm having better fun with Leo this go around than when I used to play him. And I think it's just there's a lot of new cards in the card pool now. So
is it a sled doge Leo build?
It is not. That's next on my list for Leo. I have to work my way up to sled doge. But yeah, almost there. Almost there.
Fantastic. Nick, how about you?
I actually did a sled doge build with Lola, because I was like, let's capitalize on the neutral stuff. It was okay. It was fine. But I've played a little bit of Arkham. I've continued my Edge of the Earth campaign. I am up to Heart of Madness Part 1, I think. I would ask, but I don't want to spoil anything for anybody. So, yeah, because it goes Forbidden Peaks, City, and then Heart, right?
Heart is the last scenario in the campaign.
Yeah. Okay, so, yep, I'm up to Heart of Madness Part 1. It's really good. I mean, Edge is awesome. Like, I am loving it. I'm excited to, as soon as this one's done, tear down the decks, build some new ones, and go at it again, and try and get the order of the scenarios to be a little different, because there's one that I didn't hit until much later, when you have the opportunity to go into it earlier if things go a certain way. So I'm excited to try that out. And also, since our main episode was pushed back, we originally had it on the schedule for last week, and now we pushed it to this Monday, I decided to squeak out a cheeky little achievement hunter.
Boy, I'm glad that's how that sentence ended.
I did Ashcan Pete, just Ashcan, no Duke. Pour one out for Duke. Going through Where Doom Awaits, and I was very concerned about this scenario just because I know that it can end the campaign, and it's been so long since I played Where Doom Awaits, and I haven't played the Return to version in a very long time that I kind of forgot what to expect. I just remember it being like a bottleneck of the campaign. But it turns out I had nothing to worry about for the most part.
You played the Return version?
I played the Return version. Oh, of course.
Okay.
Yeah, that's where the achievements are. So
yeah, of course.
But it was very close. It wasn't close to the wire on Doom, but I was ahead of the game, and I could have ended at any point, and I was like, there's an achievement I can get here if I just try and position things correctly. So if people listen to the episode, at the end of the episode, you'll hear that. And I pushed for that achievement. And I won't say if I got it or not, so you can go back and listen and be surprised. But it looked hairy there for a second, only because of my own choice and play style as an achievement hunter. You know what I mean? Like I had like 4 turns to spare, so I could have just resigned and been done, but I didn't. Anyway, no, it's fun. I mean, Where Doom Awaits I think it's still a pretty solid scenario. It feels like a penultimate scenario. You know what I mean? Like literally climbing the hill and dealing with the shit going up there, and then the locations are getting weirder and weirder as you go up. It's been a long time since I played it, and I was surprised at how much I enjoyed it. So that was good. And then we're going into Lost in Time and Space, and that one's going to be a real shit show. That I just have to survive and win. I just have to get investigators win the campaign. And then all of the achievements I've gotten this far, which are like 5, will be good. So,
Lost in Time and Space still confuses me. Like, to this
it's such
day.
a mess.
Yeah. Like, I realize there's one... Like, you can get a map and print it out on a piece of paper to know which locations you need to go to. That kind of feels like cheating a little bit to me, but also not. I'm not sure. But, I mean, we did it for exploring, but still.
Right. Yeah, so I have no idea how Lost in Time and Space is going to go. I also remember that Return to Lost in Time and Space, I think, adds locations.
It does.
So, like, what was a mess before is just going to get even worse. But we'll see how it goes. I'm still playing on easy, you know, and so tests are, for the most part, super easy. And Ashcan is still, even without Duke, Ashcan is fun. He's just not as consistent. Like, I hit this point where I had Moonstone in my hand, and I was like, oh, great, because I'm running, you know, Battle Mage Ashcan. But I didn't have any assets in play that exhausted because Duke was gone.
Oh, no.
So I was like, how do I play Moonstone? And it wasn't until I got Drawing Thin in play that I was like, oh, thank God, now I can do this. Like, I can get Moonstone. But I hit this moment where like, I was like, yeah, Ashcan will be fine without Duke. And then I just one little thing and threw up my whole strategy. But so that's about it. That is literally it when it comes to Arkham. So
Well, fun. We'll have to check in for the harrowing conclusion, I'm sure.
yeah.
Fantastic.
If only there was a way we could listen to it.
If only. All right, excellent. So we, like I said, our discussion topic today is going to be driven by a voicemail, so we're going to skip the hotline. Though always, if you have a comment, question, a disagreement, an agreement, always feel free to call the Mythos Busters hotline. That's 203-493-6984 or 203-493-MYTH. Ian, what's going on with patron stuff right now?
All right, so first off, a big thanks to our board members. That's Chris B, Chris H, and Chris M, our conglomeration of Chris's. Morton, Jared, Ian, Kyle, Philip, Patrick, Abilio, Jesse, Chad, and Robert. Thanks so much for your huge support of the podcast. And a special shout out to a random patron this time around goes to Colonel Duke Lacrosse. Thanks, Colonel, for your support as well. We do appreciate it. That sounds like this patron should be on the edge of the earth. Expedition, I think. So, good luck, Colonel. Also, if you have never visited our mythosmerch.com site, or even if you have, you should go visit there, see what we have, and especially if you have any pictures of you wearing it out in the wild, on a trip to go Christmas or holiday shopping, or a trip to Antarctica, go ahead and send those to us. And finally, we do have a new job title to give out. Hot off the presses of HR. Fighting Mongoose is going to be our new resident Zoog rights activist, and in charge of a brand new organization, PETS, People for the Ethical Treatment of Zoogs, as it is known. So, good luck fighting Mongoose.
Yeah,
it's like a normal Pets, but extreme with the Z.
Mm-hmm. But that's extreme. It was actually a toy line of really cute, like, chibi pets back in like the early 2000s. I don't know if you remember that.
I do.
Mm-hmm. It existed. Have fun fighting Mongoose. Those Zoogs, just keep your fingers away from their mouths and you'll be fine.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
They're cute, tiny little mouths.
I just recently noticed the art on... Which Zoog was it? One of it might be the furtive Zoog, where it's like munching on someone's hand. I don't know why I never noticed that art before.
What? That's like literally the first thing I ever noticed. It's like, oh my
God. All I
God.
saw was like weird mouth. And I didn't go beyond to what was going inside weird mouth.
Well,
moving on.
we all have blind spots, I guess.
Yep.
All right. So news. Who's doing news nowadays? I should know this.
Oh, I mean, I can.
Sure.
Because I think it is normally me. So I think the only... Well, oh, shit. I didn't check it since we got pushed back. Is there anything else to talk about?
Nope.
Okay. Thanks, Scott. The only notable news you won't find on Fantasy Flight's website, but the Embracer Group, aka THQ Nordic, acquires Asmodee for $3.1 billion. This happened a couple weeks ago. Exciting stuff. Don't really know what, if anything, that's going to mean for... I mean, I would imagine that doesn't mean anything for probably the most successful game that Asmodee has right now. But it's just... things are changing, so it's exciting to see what that means in the future. The article that I have in our show notes here, I'll link in chat in case anybody's interested in checking that out. I like how this article calls out Asmodee as the Catan board game company. Like,
that hurts my soul a little bit.
It does.
Does that make anyone else twitch?
It does.
I mean, you said their most successful game, maybe like currently for sales, but Catan has been around for it is this generation's almost Monopoly now.
Oh,
you know, like
you're right.
everyone has a Catan in their closet somewhere.
Yeah,
So.
I think I guess I meant like ongoing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I bought Catan out of obligation, and I think I've busted it out once.
I own it. I've played maybe 7 or 8 games, and every game I get, because you need like 12 victory points, I get to 10, and then 6 turns go by, and I can't get another one, and then someone shoots up from like 5 to 12 in one turn, and I just lose my fucking mind. So it's a great game. Check it out. But anyway.
What? God damn it!
You're going to lose your mind when you realize that you only need 10 to win, but...
Oh, okay. Well, then just knock all my points down by 2. Like, that's literally it. Like, the experience is accurate. The numbers are not. So that's interesting. THQ Nordic, Embracer Group. We'll see what happens. Until then, keep playing Arkham.
Yep.
From the people I've chatted with that like kind of look at this and this acquisition is the previous company who owned Asmodee was a
private equity firm.
Yeah, like they just want to like strip it down, make it look really profitable, and sell it, which they kind of did, I guess.
Yep, certainly succeeded in the stripping.
Yeah.
Oh God.
Right, which really
Not
think
the
hurt.
fun kind.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so yeah.
But this Embracer Group is a gaming company.
Right.
So, and they are not the type of company, like their track record is not stripping down and selling at a profit. Their thing is like, let's get more and more game companies to make more and more games. Fingers crossed, this is, I think we all have a bad taste in our mouth from the last time like FFG got purchased by Asmodee, then Asmodee got purchased by this person. Like, this one might be good, or at least just better than negative. So,
Well, a boy can dream.
yeah.
Now, I think that we owe it to Justin to say that he called this a couple years ago after seeing some of the trends coming out of Asmodee and FFG. He's like, they're going to sell it. They're aiming to sell at some point. So he nailed this one on the head. So good job, Justin.
Yeah, with these kind of things, I've kind of learned to just like sit on it for a few years and see what's going to happen before me. Because I remember, I think it was when Asmodee acquired FFG originally, and then Asmodee itself got acquired. There were a lot of like sweeping proclamations from big board game creators, like this will change nothing. Don't worry, this isn't going to have any effect. And I think we've all seen that was very not true. So, best advice, we'll see. We'll see when we see. Mm-hmm. But I am hopeful though, based on kind of what Scott said about that this is not one of those little demon organizations that just goes around and just likes
an organization that just makes
companies,
money,
basically. Yeah.
The goal isn't to make money. Well, I mean, the goal is to make money, but I mean,
goal is always to make money
through selling games, not by taking a company, wrecking it, and making it look profitable.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Agreed.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope that this means the best for everyone's favorite Catan board game company.
And we can all look forward to the return of Hey, That's My Fish.
Hey, My Fish LCG
Third edition.
when.
Yeah. Still waiting for that LCG. Yep.
All right. But that was it for news.
Wonderful. Scott, any big rules things you want to mention this time around?
Nothing's come up. I think I'm gonna try and do a big in the coming year hopefully early, a big trolling through of any big rules questions that have come up from Edge of the Earth, because I also don't want it to be spoilery. So I'm cautious with those, but I think maybe like our first episode in February. It gives enough people enough time to kind of get through, especially with the holidays and stuff like that. So,
Sounds good.
yeah.
Wonderful. So then let's move on to the main Tupac of today. So today's discussion prompt comes from Big Kahuna, who calls into the Mythos Busters hotline, and he writes. No, I'm just kidding. I'm going to play it for you here.
Hey Busters, it's Chris, Big Kahuna on Discord. And I just wanted to take a couple of minutes to talk to you guys about encounter card power creep in the game. The difficulty of Innsmouth Conspiracy took a major step forward at the outset in this respect. I know that you guys discussed this topic seemingly at the beginning of most campaigns, but I wanted to talk about it in a more concrete way by comparing the various card types. In enemies, in the pre-Innsmouth Conspiracy, they usually take multiple actions to deal with, but normally do bad things to you through doom, damage, and the like only after the next investigation phase. For instance, Night Gaunts or Acolytes. In the Innsmouth Conspiracy, they still take multiple actions to deal with, but now they cause the negative effects immediately upon spawning and engaging. For instance, the Deep One Bull or Lurking Deep One. We also have treacheries with tests. Pre-Innsmouth Conspiracy, tests usually happen where if you pass, nothing terrible happens to you. But if you fail, then something bad happens. In the Innsmouth Conspiracy, there's a little bit of a split here. Some of them are the same. You still have nothing bad to happen to you if you pass, but they have extra auto-fails built in, like Macabre Memento or Memory of Oblivion. Or something bad happens to you regardless, and an extra bad thing happens to you if you fail. For instance, Furtive Locals or Psychic Pull. And then there's always the treacheries without tests, and those aren't dramatically different. Let's call a spade a spade. Pit of Despair was aptly named. There are obviously some exceptions when comparing older scenarios and their encounter cards, but I feel like the difficulty has gotten higher. The non-spoiler advice I give to my friends for Innsmouth Conspiracy is to make sure your investigator functions, and functions well at level 0. Don't plan out a deck that needs 5 to 10 experience before the engine runs. In addition to rougher treacheries, you start the campaign with a bag loaded with bad stuff tokens that usually take a whole campaign to accumulate. You can clean the bag up a bit if you're doing well, but you really have to work at it. Innsmouth does give you a good amount of experience in the mid-campaign, but gives you limited opportunities to spend it. It almost feels like it's crowding out some of the less efficient decks to the point of, if I want to play some kind of cute jank, I go back to Dunwich or Carcosa. Anyway, I know this call's running long, but I just wanted to hear what you had to say about this. Also, thanks to the Edge of the Earth Investigated expansion. Bye.
Do we owed thanks for that?
Oh,
thanks, MJ.
He won.
Yeah. Oh yeah, he won the prize. Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Yep. Okay, that's what that was. You're welcome, and thank you for participating in our myriad contests. Okay. So this is an immense topic, and I'm going to say at the outset here, we're just going to kind of freeform this. We could do multiple episodes on this. And for those of you who have played through, I'm going to frame this from my previous experience. Those of you who played through the life of the Lord of the Rings LCG, I think saw a decent amount of encounter card creep in that game. And I think this is, I guess, going to be my thesis statement for this discussion. I think it was far more pronounced than anything we've seen in Arkham. And it eventually drove me out of the game. So power creep is definitely a thing that we kind of have to keep an eye on. In general, where do you guys think Arkham is at from an encounter card power creep perspective?
You know, okay, bold but true here. there is 100% power creep in Arkham. And it is very apparent to me that it's there. But I'm also one of those people that this level of power creep I feel is okay, but I'm also saying this from the privileged position of being the person who has like been in this game from the beginning and not someone who's buying in today, who's like, sweet, revised core set. Oh my god, I love Innsmouth. Wow, this is a terrible experience, right? Like, I can see that too. So yeah, I have a lot more to profound on, but I'm going to save it for later on.
Yeah,
Sure. I'm literally playing through Dunwich right now for Achievement Hunter. And yes, I'm playing on easy. Like, I get that. And yes, I'm playing with a very powerful solo investigator, Ashcan. But...
I mean, you were.
Well, right, yeah. I mean, now it's true solo is what it is. Before I was two-handing it with my dog. But let's not isolate that clip. Let's just move on. But I mean... It's really easy. Dunwich is easy. And yes, I'm playing on easy, but I also played on easy with Knight of the Zealot, and I think who was I? Finn? And I still don't think I got everything I wanted to in that. Whereas I've gotten extra achievements with Ashcan in Dunwich. So just comparing that to, I mean, Innsmouth is brought up in the voicemail. It's night and day, I think. But I also kind of have a different... My opinion comes from the other side of it, where I feel like the encounter card has power creep because the player cards also have power creep.
Kind of a push me, pull you kind of thing, huh?
Yeah, and I think we can talk about that more later, but I feel like... Because whenever I go into a new campaign, like brand new, building decks that I know that already existed, it feels hard. But when I really try and use the newer cards, Edge of the Earth is a great example, it doesn't feel as hard. You know what I mean? So we can discuss that further. But yeah, that's my general thought, is that power creep exists, but it exists on both sides of the game.
Sure. Ian, where are you at?
My initial thoughts, I think between me and Sean, if you are still playing the Lord of the Rings drinking game, you're probably going to die by the end of this episode. Because I'll probably be referencing that game a lot. Because I think so much, I can't help it because so much of how I view this topic for Arkham is influenced by that experience. Where I still love Lord of the Rings, but the power creep in that game was immense. To the point where in the last, the later cycles, you did really have this feeling of like, I want to play this really cool deck idea I have, but I'm not going to because I know it's going to get smashed. Whereas I'll say that there has been power creep in Arkham to a certain extent. I think TFA was probably the spike. But to my mind, although there's been power creep, my initial thoughts, and maybe this will change by the end of our discussion, is that the power creep isn't that extreme, at least from my experience. And again, similar to what some of you all have mentioned, some of that plays into, like, I have full access to all the player cards, and I'm very familiar with that. So maybe if I was coming in with a fresh, perspective as a new player. But I don't have that feeling when I'm playing like Innsmouth or TCU or Dream Eaters or some of the later cycles in the game of, oh, I can't play this deck because it's a cool deck idea, but I don't think it's gonna do well. Like I personally don't have that feeling. I'm like, okay, I'll try it. And maybe it won't perform as well as my better deck types, but I still can get wins and it's not going to smash me. So that's just my very subjective measurement, which maybe isn't the best measurement. And I am totally comparing it to Lord of the Rings, but that's kind of where I'm starting.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's an interesting thing. And what I love about our little group here is that we do kind of have a range of perspective. Like, Ian, you and I very much have trauma from Lord of the Rings. I'm very much with you where like my perspective on it is I don't mind challenge, and I do think that power creep is inevitable because the more you broaden the player card pool, the more variable and focused player cards can be, so you have to account for that in scenarios. Where it will fall down for me is if it gets to a point of difficulty where you are crowding out everything but the most finely tuned decks. Which I think is kind of what Big Kahuna was maybe suggesting that Innsmouth does a little bit. We've had MJ on in the past and talking about encounter card design, and one thing that has come up more than once is how hard some of the first scenarios can hit, and I think that precedent goes all the way back to Curtain Call, right?
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep, for sure.
And that is a really interesting thing to talk about, because the way those encounter cards are tuned is, you're going to use those encounter sets throughout the campaign, so they have to be just as relevant in the later half of the campaign as they do in the former half. So what ends up happening is those first scenarios can get really tough. Mm-hmm. And they can be a bit of a slap to the face, and I think you have to actively decide that, okay, I know this deck is going to have a rough time, levels 0 through 10, but once I get the right cards, it'll start functioning, and that is decidedly a hill you have to decide to climb.
The risk with that, though, is, if you're saying, from 0 to 9 XP, this is going to suffer a bit, but once I get to 10, then it's going to hum along. It's like, well, you have to get to 10. So if you have this big slap in the face at the beginning, or the first two scenarios, let's say, and you get a total of 4 experience from them, now you're going into scenario 3, and maybe you can't spend experience. Mm-hmm. But, let's take that part out of it, because that was weird. But if you're only getting a minimum amount of experience because you suffered in the first 2 scenarios, then your deck is never going to take off, too. That's a weird risk. One thing, too, I found weird about Innsmouth, I think Innsmouth is just a weird campaign. I love it. It's great. But man, is it ever ass backwards to me? Because it the first 2 scenarios can go really wrong really fast, and then you get to the final scenario, and I'm like, is this the same game? Because it felt so easy to me.
Yeah.
Right? I'm used to Shattered Eons and Lost in Time and Space, and these these scenarios where it's this is the final scenario, or before the Black Throat. My God, the fact that we beat that in Iron Man is just all luck. But it just, and then you get to Innsmouth, and I'm like, what? But it's backwards because the first scenario kicked my ass, really bad.
Well, it's all a flashback, so it is backwards.
Yeah, yeah. Oh well, there it is.
Yeah. So, and I think what another interesting aspect of talking about this is that you're going to have wildly differing experiences with the overall experience. Wow, I keep Austin powering today. Depending on your player count. So I think inevitably or inherently, 3 and 4 player are just always going to have more options and more flexibility to beat whatever, because there's just more players and more skill sets to tap for whatever the current obstacle is. Whereas with solo, you literally, whatever the obstacle is, you've got to take care of it yourself.
Yeah.
So to you guys who play more true solo, do you think that the curve of difficulty has been more varied in true solo throughout the life of the game, or do you think it's maybe a little flatter than multiplayer?
Okay, so this I think goes back to one of Big Kahuna's points, where he's talking about I want to bring my my janky fun deck, but no, I have to bring my highly tuned deck. If you want to play successful solo, you have to bring a highly tuned, focused deck.
And that has always existed, I guess, right?
Right, and so that mindset of going into a solo campaign that's going to be tougher, or a campaign that's more difficult, if you already have that solo player mindset, you're bringing a highly tuned deck anyways. So I think the feeling of that power creep is lessened in solo, specifically solo, not 2-player, because of that mindset around solo.
Sure. I was going to say, I haven't played true solo blind play of a campaign since Dream Eaters, I think. So I've been doing a lot of two-handed for my blind plays. So
Sure.
but I would agree with Scott's assessment.
Yeah, I don't think anything is that different in terms of true solo, other than the only factor that really plays into that a lot is map size, I feel like. And so someone would really need to do an analysis of has map size truly increased over the life of the game? And just on a purely subjective feel, I don't know that it has beyond particular scenarios. But then
each campaign kind of has a few explosions of the map.
Right. Although now that I'm kind of thinking about this most recent campaign, Edge of the Earth, I might revise that. But I was playing as Monterey Jack, and he kind of makes map sizes feel much smaller, so it kind of alters that analysis in my mind. But yeah, I guess it's really that. But on the other hand, I feel like we have seen more on the encounter side, more nods to that of okay, let's adjust the map if you're playing in a lower player count, or adjust some elements of it, and maybe we'll see more of that going to the future. I guess short version of it is again Innsmouth is a weird campaign, because I'm thinking of there are a couple scenarios in there that are particularly difficult in true solo because of map size and because you have to hit a lot of them. Is it Devil Reef, the one where you have to collect those little relics, and it's super hard in true solo to get them all? Yeah, so
I would argue impossible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's even pretty tough in 4-player because you only have one boat, and there are tricks to deal with that, but there's only so many. So
yeah.
First turn resign. That's the Iron Man plan.
Volkgloss in chat brings up a great point, which is I feel like Innsmouth has the largest difficulty gulf between make it through the campaign intact versus nail these stretch goals along the way. And I think that's where it is. I think especially coming out of the early campaigns of Arkham, we've kind of been trained and we've adapted this mindset, especially someone like me doing a whole, series on getting all the achievements. To get those things, to check off all the boxes and to get everything we can. Whereas in Innsmouth, you can be successful and leave a lot of that, on the table. As me with my mindset, it just doesn't feel good to do that. So,
well, and that's interesting to think about too, because we can each of us meter what is success and therefore what is difficulty, very differently. If, you're fine with 10 XP throughout the entire campaign, victory looks a lot easier than those of us who want to get to 20, 30.
Just play Survivor. You're good.
Well, there's that.
Full build, 8 XP. Yeah.
Okay, so one thing that I think, again, kind of going back to Lord of the Rings, one of the problems I had with that level of power creep is that there were very specifically player cards that you could just straight up point to be like, you warped the meta.
And they came out early.
I'm looking at you, Asphalloth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think Arkham as a game is more mechanically even and metered than Lord of the Rings is through its action system and through XP and that sort of thing. So it's a lot more balanced.
Locations.
Yeah.
I think that matters a lot, right? Like the fact that we have a map and Lord of the Rings is
doesn't.
Well, you're all in the same spot, Oh, and hand limits.
Yeah,
I
that's
point
big.
out too. Yeah,
and the elite keyword. I think that pulls a lot of weight when it comes to metering power.
So out of the gate, Arkham comes out mechanically a lot more sound in its way to kind of cut the top off of what player cards can do. Obviously, there are degenerate combos that people have figured out because those people will always figure it out. But I'm saying for your normal player, it's just a lot more even. But do you guys think there are any player cards in Arkham that have had a similar, if not as strong, an effect on encounter card design?
On encounter design? Ooh. I'm not that. I don't know. I would say on other player card design, yes, definitely. but encounter design's trickier.
It's hard, right? Like the best I had was level 2 shortcut. The only thing I can think of was War of the Outer Gods. The central location couldn't have attachments because it was like, yeah, of course we're going to put shortcut there.
Yeah. Or barricade.
Sure.
Barricade the city of Arkham.
That old chestnut.
Yeah, it's tough because a lot of really powerful player cards are usually dealt in the form of taboo, rather than with coming out with encounter sets that are specifically made, or rather that we perceive them to be specifically made to counter those player cards. We don't really see that a whole lot. Like we haven't had encounter cards now that are like, or treacheries that are like, this can't be canceled. Or if this is canceled, instead each investigator takes whatever. Like we haven't seen anything like that to counter ward of protection or anything. So
I think there is.
There might be one or two, but it hasn't. There's
nowhere near like Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, they're not common enough that I can name them off the top of my head.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Like Lord of the Rings, it became very, very common to just see immune to player card effects on bosses or locations. And that is like, I get it. I understand why they went that way with it, but it's like the least interesting way because it's like, all right, well, I just can't interact with that now. So now there's just less game for me to play.
Yeah, the point about the taboo list is a good one, and it's one of the best reasons for it to exist is to be able to tweak those knobs through that instead of the and I'm sure Sean and I have brought this up before in terms of the taboo list, that because that didn't exist in Lord of the Rings, like they would do errata, of course, but because it's actually official errata and like changes to card text that's not optional, they would use it very sparingly. And so what ended up happening is like, since you can't taboo a card, that you just gotta, pump up certain values in the game or have hard counters through the encounter design. But since Arkham doesn't need to do that, it can do it through the taboo list. Like, I can't think of any specific cards. If there is power creep in response to player cards, I think it's just like more just the increase in power level of player cards as a whole, as a set. Like, there's just more ways to get clues now, so the encounters need to respond to that. But I don't think there's any specific cards that I can think of that the encounters just need to like hard counter those particular tools.
Which I think it speaks fantastically to the health of the player card pool, because what that did in Lord of the Rings is it was just like, okay, well, say Asphaleth, for example, which placed progress on locations. Anything else that hoped to place progress on locations immediately became less powerful because the game shifted against Asphaleth being able to just be ridiculous. So again, even getting back to my point, like that was a big moment where I was like, all right, well, I guess just all these other cards now are less playable, which I know is a, potentially a rough term to use when it comes to player cards, but it shuts out more viable decks, which is not what you want to do.
Yeah, I think the equivalent would be like, because there's deduction in other cards that let you get multiple clues, now we're going to increase the clues you need to get through each act in response. And I don't think that would be literally it. Yeah.
And I do. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Scott.
No, keep going.
Well, and I think there's an elegant way to cap too much player card focus. Like, we've got Deep Dark, and what is it? It's not Furtive Locals. Is it Fog over Innsmouth that limits how many clues you can get in a turn? But it's a treachery that's cancelable. It's a thing that only exists for a round. Sure. Like the encounter deck does think about the fact that, okay, well, a Seeker with like all of their tricks could just like scoop clues up faster than you can blink. But you can counter that in a way that feels interactive and not like you are negating other decks that are doing a similar thing, just not with yellow cards.
Yeah, and you also have, the tarot card's getting ripped up, and it's a survivor card that removes...
Alter Fate.
Alter Fate. Right, there's... The encounter deck poses issues, and there are solutions.
Oh my
Right.
God. You talk about Lord of the Rings. Conditions in Lord of the Rings did not have a way to get rid of them.
Wait, at all?
Nope.
Really?
Yep. There was like one player card for like half of the game's life in one sphere that would let you discard a condition treachery. And then they started to introduce
that
a
was,
few
like-
more.
Okay.
But yeah, for the most part, treachery conditions just like stayed in play for certain. Some of them had like a life, and would discard like.
Sure.
But yeah, it was bad. It was.
Oh, I thought for sure that was like part of what Spirit as a sphere did was deal with conditions.
Was that
Eventually.
Green Dwarf?
Yeah, it was the miner of the Iron
Yeah.
Hills.
I can see the art.
Because
Of course
you
I
had
can.
to play that card.
Yeah.
I think just the design of the two games also play it, which we've touched on a little bit because, and not to turn this into too much of a Lord of the Rings compared to Arkham podcast, but it's inevitable at this point for this topic. But like in Lord of the Rings, because it's more of a traditional like throw people on the table and smash them together, and it's just like the encounter deck is meant to mimic your opponent. Like the way, so like top player decks in that game have to almost be exponential. Like they just kind of feed off each other and have this really big spike in power. And so encounter decks need to do the same thing. So they need to really, in order to counter those, or at least that was the thought on the design side, is at least to counter those, you need to have the encounter deck almost be exponential and just like spike out of control over time. Or more often, just like spam stuff out really quickly in the first turn, and that would be the challenge for the player to see if they can kind of catch up, essentially. But in Arkham, it doesn't feel that same way. It doesn't feel like the encounter deck is meant to scale to match the player. It's more like how many obstacles can we throw in front of the player and force them to like figure out a solution to it. So just like the core design is so much different that's why, in my opinion, if there is power creep, and I think there has been, it's more gradual and more measured than just like, okay, let's try to match what the player is doing exactly.
Comparing it to Lord of the Rings as well, I mean, Lord of the Rings, when you look at individual scenario design, you also didn't have, well, I mean, in the design of the game, you didn't have XP cards, which we have, and you didn't have to think about knowing, you know, like as a designer, when MJ puts these things together, like, she knows, unless someone's doing standalone, which is, I would say, quite rare for someone to be like, hey, I'm just going to play this standalone, this one scenario, unless it's one of the specific ones, like Depths of Yoth or something.
Right.
But anyways, you're expecting a certain level of deck based on XP. And you're expecting that a player has gone through certain scenarios in order. Whereas Lord of the Rings, like, I mean, yeah, sure, there were some quote-unquote campaigns in the later game, like the life of it, even just like story-wise, but each of those are individual and there's no XP. So like everyone, I think the idea came to them, I guess, that anyone can bring a power deck at any time, and so we have to be able to combat that power deck at any time through that scenario.
Yep.
And that's where I see that power creep kind of, it's like that big, like, cartoonish power switch, you know, that has, it's shaped like an H, and it's on a big lever, it's just like, clunk, and all of a sudden it's not a, like, an increase in difficulty, it's just a fucking wall of difficulty, and that's what Lord of the Rings hit.
I was going to say, just kind of responding to some of the back and forth in chat, and I know that they're just, you know, being silly, but this constant comparison to Lord of the Rings, I'm sure some of our listeners might think it's kind of tiresome, especially those who never played Lord of the Rings. I kind of find it tiresome, but at the same time, there really is no other game that has experienced this life cycle and gone through this, you know, this LCG cooperative game, other than Lord of the Rings. The only other option we have to compare it to is Marvel, but I think Marvel and Arkham are so vastly different Whereas
If we want to talk about power creep in Marvel, oh boy.
It's a totally different conversation. Yeah.
Strap in.
No, it's a much shorter conversation because it was a spike. Like, it literally just shot right up there.
Spike
But anyway,
right through the eye. Yeah, keep going.
but anyways, Arkham and Lord of the Rings are so much closer to each other in just the DNA of the game, whereas Arkham and Marvel are very different. And that's, again, Marvel is really the only other one that you could have this sort of conversation on a comparative basis. So even though if some of our listeners are like, oh, they're talking about Lord of the Rings again, or even me, sometimes someone who's played a number of games but didn't really get caught into it is like, all right, well, we're keep comparing it to Lord of the Rings. But at the same time, that's the best way for us. That's the best barometer or measuring stick that we have.
It is, and I keep bringing Lord of the Rings up as kind of a measuring stick to see, like, this is where, in my opinion, this game kind of went awry in its design. Yeah. And I think in general, Arkham has avoided most of those problems.
Yes.
So while power creep is a thing, I don't think I hear people complaining about it as much in the Arkham community, and I think that's pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
So Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, we stand on the shoulders of giants, right? Like, that's a common thing. Like, the reason Arkham exists is because Lord of the Rings exists, for the most part. Like, I mean, that idea, I think. I see J. Paul mentioning Pathfinder too, like, very much also a story-driven, XP, kind of stuff like that. And I think we have to acknowledge where lessons were learned in Lord of the Rings. And then, Marvel there will be lessons from Arkham, and then those lessons will be promptly forgotten.
Well, oddly enough, I think Marvel is more comparable to Lord of the Rings too, so I guess it's just the granddaddy of everything.
Yeah. The interesting thing about Arkham too is that the more we talk about this issue and we keep bringing up Innsmouth, the more it becomes apparent to me that I guess you could trace a kind of power creep line for Arkham, but I don't think it would be like a continual line up. I think it kind of goes up and down a little bit depending on the cycle. Like Innsmouth might have been a little spike, but just having played Edge of the Earth, I don't know that I would say Edge of the Earth is definitely harder than Innsmouth. You know what I mean? It might even be easier in some respects. And a lot of that just depends on factors. And of course that could be true for other games in the sense that like each cycle is self-contained in terms of the encounter sets. That was true for Lord of the Rings as well. But for that game, felt like there was more of a straight line and progression in power as it went on. So I think, and this is probably, I think it is a credit to the Arkham design team that they just have an appreciation for the fact that like each cycle is its own thing. And even though, let's say, Innsmouth might have had some elements that made it more difficult, that doesn't mean that needs to be translated to the next cycle. Like if we take what Big Kahuna brought up in the voicemail about like these effects that hit you when they engage you, like on the enemies, for example, that definitely does make things more difficult, and that is a source of a lot of the difficulty of Innsmouth. But it's not like we then saw that applied to Edge of the Earth right away. It almost feels like that was specific to Innsmouth and what it was trying to do.
Mm-hmm. And the fact that you have to add so much qualification and nuance, and you don't just say Innsmouth is harder than everything else.
Yep.
I think that's a success right there. Like, yeah, it's got moments, and certainly it's got Pit of Despair. But there's a lot of ebb and flow. There's a lot of but. There's a lot of you can play these cards or take this strategy to account for it. And I think that's a victory of design right there.
Mm-hmm. Right. I think one thing too, and this kind of goes back to, I would argue, remember that interview we did with Nate and MJ way back, and about balance?
Chaos Sock?
Yeah, if anyone out there hasn't listened to that, that interview.
That was a great Nate moment.
Oh my goodness, there are just so many drops of wisdom coming from Nate, and it just like I kind of knew the guy, and I was like, oh, you know, he makes games and stuff, but like listening to him talk, I'm like, oh, that's why you make games, because there's just something in there, right? But his big thing was there's no, like, if you don't have good cards, if every card is good, then no card is good, and there has to be some imbalance in a game. And I think that the upping of power level of various parts of the game allows, or at least on the encounter side, allows a slight upping of power level or design ability in player cards, which keeps it interesting. Because one thing, so for those who don't play Lord of the Rings, I'm now going to mention Marvel, and we were talking about this before, not on the cast, but the design in Marvel, to me, like, I was a big fan of the game, and it slowly started to kind of feel repetitious. And it kind of felt that way because I felt like the encounter sets weren't getting any harder, and so they weren't being pushed to make different player cards. So there's so many player cards, it's like, do 3 of this, but if you pay with this type of resource, do 4 instead. And it's just not exciting. Like, the player cards didn't grab me anymore. I wasn't excited to open that new pack and see what Justice had for a new card, or Aggression, or whatnot. Whereas in Arkham, because we have within a campaign, a baked-in increase in difficulty, and then also it's seeming now, I mean, like Ian, like you said, it's not a perfectly straight line, but it's kind of like averaging towards a little bit up. That between campaigns, like an increase in difficulty in campaigns, it allows the design team to create player cards that are exciting. And they might do about the same thing, but maybe they're a bit better, or maybe they do them differently, or maybe it takes a few more cards to make them combo, and then they have an explosive action that clears all the clues off the map or whatnot, right? And I think that's what keeps a game like Arkham exciting. And I look at Marvel and I don't see that. And that's why I think I'm okay with a bit of difficulty increase, like a bit of power creep.
Right.
I mean, let's acknowledge also the elephant in the room of the Galaxy's Most Wanted box, which is just a spike in the eye of difficulty. But yeah, like, I'm okay with a little bit of power creep, and I think Arkham is progressing at the level of power creep I enjoy.
Right. I was going to say, I think another, like, since we're talking about Marvel, I think one thing that really differentiates Marvel from Arkham considerably, I would argue, is, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't collect Marvel and I don't keep up with the releases, but aren't there vastly more player cards in Marvel per, like, the ratio of player card to encounter card in Marvel is vastly in the group of player cards, whereas in Arkham it's probably a little more closer to even. Because all of the Marvel packs are their decks. They're just hero cards.
Yeah, but there's lots of reprints.
Oh, there are.
There's core set reprints almost in every single pack.
Really? I did not know that.
Yeah, they're not unique cards.
Oh, interesting. But even still, does it feel like there are a lot more player cards in Marvel per encounter set versus Arkham?
I don't know that I've ever heard anyone complain that there aren't enough campaigns to play in Arkham, but I've definitely heard people talk about how they wish they had more villains in Marvel. So,
and I think that might, if I were in the designer's chair and that was the release model I had to go with, you know, where the packs are heroes and then the box is the campaign, I would almost, and I'm not saying that I would end up doing what they did with Marvel, but I'm saying that I would definitely have it in my mind saying, I want this campaign to be impactful. I want people to play it and feel it and remember it. You know what I mean? Because the campaign releases are so few and far between compared to, oh, now I got Black Widow, now I've got Thor, now I've got, this hero. So it's also something to consider when it comes to just the mentality of creating the game in such a way. Not that I think it's an excuse for what happened with Guardians, but anyway.
I don't want to crap all over Marvel because I know lots of people love that game. It was just it's very apparent to me that like that's what my drop off was the like I was okay-ish with the amount of encounter sets and encounters there were, but to me it was the player cards. I'm just like opening up these packs and I'm like I am not excited at all for what's in these packs. And because Marvel was like my side game, I wasn't like looking online, just like I was having that experience of opening the pack and seeing the cards, right? And I was opening these packs and I get to the end, I'm like, huh, neat. Right? Like just
Okay.
okay.
So, kind of centering it back on Arkham again, I think just from a general game design perspective, one of the easiest ways to make a game more difficult is just to crank the numbers up, right?
Oh, sure.
And that could be in the form of the Chaos Bag mix, which I feel like among the difficulties has actually stayed pretty even. The -5 in TFA notwithstanding. That could be with like fight and evade numbers on enemies, and it could be shroud on locations. I think in general Arkham's done a pretty good job of not just cranking up the numbers, though I will say maybe this is just something with Edge of the Earth. I found myself in Edge of the Earth a lot thinking like, can I just find a location with lower than 4 shroud, please?
Yeah.
I don't know if that was just me, but that is a thing that I thought more than once.
Well, also now I think the numbers have gone up, but I don't think it's in a significant way. But like I think the average health for like a low enemy now is 3, whereas back in Dunwich days it used to be 2. There are a lot more 2/2/2s back in Core and Dunwich and maybe even Carcosa, whereas now we see a lot more 3/3/3s for enemies. So.
That's one thing I was totally gonna say the same thing, Nick. Like that's the one thing I've noticed is the 2/2/2 is a very rare thing now. Whereas I thought 2/2/2 was very common, and it's been cranked just a bit, maybe a 2/2/3 or a 3/2/3, right? Or 3/3/3, and it just
our Chuds have gotten spongier.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
I
also
like
maybe
spongy
that
Chuds.
was and it makes me wonder, is that like, I think there's a couple reasonings to that. Is like, one is that because maybe 2/2/2 was a bit too easy for what this game was going to be, or 2, is this an Asphalov problem again, right? Where
I think it's probably closer to Asphalov, because if you look at the early card pool, not everyone had easily accessible or even moderately easily accessible damage increases. So, you had to account for those survivors who maybe didn't have Fire Axe and just had to like bash away at it with their fists. Whereas
But
now
the difference
everyone's
is-
got something.
But a big difference is that we can't. I think in Arkham you can't pinpoint it to a specific card release that turned into then enemies now all being 3/3/3.
Yes.
Whereas with Lord of the Rings, you keep bringing up Asphalov, so that's obviously the clear turning point for location progression and all that. So.
Yeah, I think the values have definitely gone up, but it's been more of a gradual tweak. And again, kind of going back to like it's a response to a general growth in the power of the card pool, which is fine. Like I think you can like ramp up the difficulty of the encounters a little bit. You don't want it to be too easy, but I think it's when you start getting into that overreaction mode of this card has suddenly made things too easy. Let's turn that knob up to 11 and really create these tough difficulties. And then it also gets into that place of I'm not even sure how much I want to get into this topic of like, how does the game respond to different types of players, let's say, like the types of players that are going to put out the most powerful cards together and the most powerful combinations and just blow away scenarios or quests in Lord of the Rings. Like, at a certain point, it almost felt like in Lord of the Rings, it was like, well, we need to create scenarios that will challenge those decks, right? Because we don't want them to make those too easy. But then what happens to the, like, other, like, 90% of decks that just want to put fun cards together and have a chance?
They become unplayable, is what happens.
And to a degree, I don't want to speculate too much on Marvel because I haven't played it a ton. I played it a bit, but I didn't follow community stuff really. But maybe that played a factor too. And I know the Marvel community was crazy where they were playing like hundreds of games before the game was even released. Like finding the most powerful decks before it was released and running over scenarios and really saying that this game is too easy. I did see that part of it, at least, that these scenarios are way too easy. I've played these scenarios 500 times, but they're way too easy, right?
Yep.
And perhaps, again, I'm not going to speculate, but maybe there was an overreaction there too on the design, the encounter side of saying we really need to ramp this up in response. But it doesn't feel like that happens in Arkham, although there are Arkham players that similarly like to create these really like super powerful decks that can just do crazy stuff and just kind of make scenarios trivial. Thankfully, and I'm super thankful about this, it doesn't feel like the Arkham design team ever says, okay, we need to make the scenarios challenging for those players. It's just kind of, as it should be, those players going to do what they're going to do, but that shouldn't affect the design for everyone. And again, maybe that's where the taboo comes in again.
Yes, I was going to say, I think the biggest difference for that, comparing Arkham to Marvel, and this also works for Lord of the Rings, is that difficulty in general in Arkham is much more malleable than it is in Lord of the Rings or Marvel. Mm-hmm. In Marvel, a scenario comes out and it's set, and the player cards come out and they're set, and maybe there's an errata. I don't know if they've done Marvel erratas at all yet or not, but like
they fixed them.
There will be one, yeah, sure. But in Arkham, on the player side, there's taboos, and you can choose to use, the most updated taboo, at least if you're going off Arkham DB. You can use the most updated taboo list. You can go back a couple lists if you want, if there's a specific change you're looking for. Or you can just not use taboo like me if you just don't fucking care. And then there's, on the encounter side, or the chaos bag side, there's the different steps of difficulty. Mm-hmm. And so if it's like, well, yeah, I'm going to build the best deck ever, and then you play 2 or 3 games on standard, and you're like, yeah, I wiped the floor with those, but now that's boring, so I'm going to go up to hard or whatever. Like, there's so much that you can do in Arkham to custom tailor the game to fit the experience you want to have as far as power level and difficulty. And not even those things. You can go further. Like, MJ has said in the past, like, play the game you want to play. If you want to play with a standard bag, but on the hard side of the scenario reference card, do it. If standard is too hard on some games and you want to throw an extra +1 in the bag, do it. Like, there's so much that you can do, as if you're willing to just bend some of those rules, that Arkham, you can custom tailor Arkham to your preferences. Whereas Marvel, the most you can do is just build your deck differently.
Yeah, I think the malleability of the difficulty in Arkham is a saving grace. And even like looking at the later Lord of the Rings, you didn't have nightmare scenarios. Right. So how are you going to make something tougher if it's too easy for people? So you have to make it tough from the beginning, is an idea that I disagree with, but that's an idea, right? Marvel has exactly 2 difficulty levels, and they're not crazy different for the most part, right? Whereas I feel like Arkham has just this huge breadth, especially when you get the return twos, because the return twos add a lot of different options as well. Right. Like, some of them add some difficulty, some easier ones. Some of them, tone it back. It just, and some just change how the game plays. One other point I want to bring up about power creep is I think there has to be some consideration as far as the power creep in the, what do you call it? Like, the designer's ability to make the game. Like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, they've learned stuff now.
MJ's, this is like, what, cycle 7? Innsmouth was 7, right? And so, if you include the core set as whatever. But, like, I mean...
I do.
Right, like, the difficulty, the chops have increased, right?
Yes.
But also, so have the players, right? Like, people who have played from the core set, we have had power creep. Like, in the way that you can play the game and your thought processes, even in your deck building and how you make decisions in the game, you are power creeping. And so MJ has to consider that as well. That's another power creep that, she's like, well, I've discovered these things about the game, and I know that the players have discovered these things about the game, so I need to make these scenarios this way, right? To combat that. But then that's also running the risk of getting too close, and I don't think she's done this, but it is running that risk of, how do I make this harder for the diehards, but then forget the normal people. But
Right.
I don't think that's happened, but that is a possibility. But I think that, the power creep of the players and the power creep of the designer is something that often gets missed when discussing these.
And
Arkham is like we're having a conversation with MJ when we play it. It feels like we're having a conversation, and that conversation has grown throughout the years.
Yeah.
Lord of the Rings and Marvel feel like you're having an argument with the designers. And at some point, they're just like, no, you can't win.
I am speaking. And muted player card effects.
So one thing that's brought up in chat that I think is something that we haven't touched on and we probably should, and maybe we did and I missed it. I've been kind of clicking through the meme stream as we've been going. But,
God damn it, Nick.
Network 57 says there's a lot of people on Reddit asking what's the best expansion to get after the core set, and there is a genuine concern. Is core set straight into Edge of the Earth? Is that doable?
And that is ultimately the perspective that's missing from our conversation here.
Yes.
Is
Yes.
people with incomplete card pools. And that's interesting. And I don't know how possibly you could develop with that in mind. I mean, maybe it's possible. But I don't know. Has anyone been paying attention to what the newbies talk about and people who have bought like a core and maybe a starter deck and then a later campaign? Do they flounder around?
From what I've seen, I haven't seen much of that because I think someone comes into Arkham and they're like, hey, I just got the core set. What should I buy first? I see, this Edge of the Earth on the shelf, but I see all these other packs for other things. And people are like, here's the list of the order they came out, whatever cycle you can get, as early in the list as you can. That's where you should start. And so there is a bit of protection that way. Like the community is shepherding players to earlier stuff. But I haven't seen anyone just core Edge of the Earth.
Right.
But that would probably be a pretty bumpy ride, I'm guessing.
Maybe after I finish with this Edge of the Earth campaign, maybe that's what I'll do. Maybe I'll just build from the core set as if I had 2 copies of the core set. Just to try it, just to see how it goes.
Yeah.
Limited card pools are an interesting way to add more difficulty and give some cards new life. That's a fun way to go.
I've heard of people trying out alternate building things. I think this came from Netrunner. But basically you get the core set, 1 cycle, 1 deluxe, 1 pack. And that's what you build from. So you get that cycle that you really like that has a lot of cards. You get that 1 deluxe that you think really supports something. And then out of everything else, 1 more pack, right? And it's that 1 card you need to make work. So I think it's a little easier in competitive games because there's more, like they're all player cards. But something similar along those lines would be a fun way to look back at Arkham.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what's interesting, and Blurb Horror brings it up in the chat here, with the new release model. I was going to blow past it, but yeah, with the new release model, I think that the story of, okay, I got the revised core because that was on the shelf, and I got Edge of the Earth because that was on the shelf. That sort of thing is going to become more common as the new product starts to filter out the old product, and just the process of buying things starts to look different.
Yeah, thankfully the revised core included some cards that I think you would really miss if you had the old core. I almost feel like, again,
Core set power creep.
This is totally me. Yeah, totally. This is totally me just speculating because I don't know that it should be doable in terms of the cards you have. I think you might be able to stand a chance against Edge of the Earth, but it's almost though that the biggest difficult. I would be more worried for the new player in terms of wading through the complexity of setups and the rules than the actual power creep of encounter cards.
God, imagine going from Night of the Zealot to Edge of the Earth. Like, look at the text. There's narrative power creep, goddammit.
Complexity creep.
There's definitely complexity creep, and I know that's different than what we're talking about, but they're somewhat related just in the fact that, like, when you're like, and this isn't necessarily meant as a criticism because I personally like rules complexity and crazy scenario complexity, but when you have to wade through that as a player, it does make things a little bit harder, and that you have less mental bandwidth to actually play the game and figure out what strategies you're going to use. Like the game kind of teaches you through the core set and Dunwich, like what the kind of base way to play the game is and how scenarios kind of look in their more vanilla states. And so that when you go to other campaigns, you can handle what it throws at you. And be able to kind of make that progression. But if you don't have that, then I could see it being difficult, like just first figuring out how to set up the damn scenario, and then parse the rules, because there might be some weird rules questions that come up as things get more complex, and then you have to figure out how to beat the scenario. And those are all kind of interrelated.
Yeah. So one thing I really want to like round back on, Ian, you touched on it, and I think it is actually probably one of the more fascinating aspects of everything we're talking about here, is how community discourse shapes the game, and very well shapes our perception of it too. So kind of getting back to that thought of, the munchkins, the power gamers, the people who are going to build the decks that draw crap tons of cards and recur things and just like mechanically, bend the game in ways it was clearly not designed to be bent. I feel like in Lord of the Rings, or sorry, not in Lord of the Rings, in Arkham, more than Lord of the Rings or Marvel, as far as I have seen, those playstyles exist on the fringes. And I don't know exactly why that is. I don't know if it's a concerted effort or if it just kind of naturally happens in Arkham. But I feel like those kinds of decks, and they do exist, like you can break the game. It's possible. But I feel like they don't get as much play or as much attention. And I think the community discourse pushing it in that direction makes it so that, I don't know, maybe this is just difference in designers, difference in how they engage with the community. But I do know that the LCG designers all engage and pay attention to the communities. I know that is a big piece of like the LCG team's philosophy. So I do think it is interesting that in Arkham that has just not really gained as much ground to talk about. Oh, I have this degenerate deck. Now all of the encounter decks are too easy. That conversation doesn't get had as often, and I wonder if that potentially plays into one of the differences in how the games have progressed.
I definitely think there's different cultures among the three cooperative LCGs. And
for sure.
Ian, you talked about it, like with Marvel, same thing I've seen where, a pack comes out and everyone's like, well, there's already been 200 games tested.
Right.
And I'm just like, sorry, what? Like, because they're just so, like, the hunt for spoilers in Marvel is just unbelievable, right? Like, it's just
unquenching thirst.
Yeah, but I think that's also, that comes more from Marvel than the LCG community, I think, right? Like, it seems like Marvel has brought in a lot of people from comic book communities and stuff, people who might be more interested in that. Like, it's brought over some people that I know from, like, in my city, like Magic players, because they know what Marvel is, right? And they're like, oh, a cooperative game. I've seen these other guys play, like, Lord of the Rings and Arkham, and I'm not really into that, but I've read a comic book, and I like this hero, and, like, the approachability of Marvel with the hero packs, right? Like, that brings a lot of different people into it. And Lord of the Rings, I think, with Arkham, like, I feel like we're more casual of a community than Marvel. As far as, like, Marvel seems like, man, sometimes they're just so hardcore. And even as a hardcore Arkham player, I'm like, you guys got to take it down a notch.
And I think it might get back to just what the games offer, because Marvel is just, as a whole, as a game, it is way more mechanical. And the bigger portion of what you get out of that game is, twisting things around and finding the right order for the cards you play and finding the right mix for the deck. Whereas Arkham, you can do that. But part of the fun is, the Ludo narrative that unfolds based on what happens and what cards you pull at what locations and what that means for the story. And like, oh, I wanted to play around with these, these player cards. And ultimately, I think, Black Horror, Jesse says it in the chat here. What I see a lot in the Arkham community is that the degenerative decks get posted, and they're interesting, and some people really engage with them. They'll make it to the front page of Arkham DB sometimes. But for the most part, people are like, cool, moving on.
Yep.
Yeah,
Look, selfishly, I love that because Lord of the Rings... I have seen that when the degenerative deck mindset gains too much support and too much steam, it can and does warp the design of games. And
remove the encounter set from the game.
yeah.
Or counter deck. Yeah.
Look, no shade at C-Stan. I wish I had his brain. But like when you start going in that direction and also talking about it like that's a legitimate way to play the game, or at least to aspire to play the game, that's going to have an effect on the community discourse, and the developers pay attention to that. I can't imagine that there's any way that it doesn't have some effect on the development of the game.
Yeah, I mean, as a designer, you cannot help but be influenced by it. Like, even if you had a mindset of, I want to do what I want to do, and I'm not going to let this affect me. Let's just imagine that our podcast and the other prominent Arkham podcasts and content creators were continually talking about how easy the game was and these crazy power decks we were playing that were just smashing it. And if that was the common discourse in Discord too, and other places, like, how could you not, as a designer, just be like, okay, I need to like ramp things up to respond? Like, you would just have to. There's no way.
That's the feedback you're getting.
Yeah, and so the fact that doesn't happen, and I'm not trying to turn this into us patting ourselves on the back, but I think it's the community.
I mean, we are great.
Yeah, I think the Arkham community in general can pat itself on the back for that. That I'm glad. I too am glad that's not the discourse, and that. And again, there's so many things in Arkham, like we talked about, both the culture, but the kind of game it is. Like, I don't think it really rewards doing that. Like, so much of Arkham is in the narrative, and I don't mean in the story text. I mean, like, the narrative you build with your decks through a campaign. Like, oh, this time I really struggled, but then I made tweaks to the deck through upgrades, and this next campaign, this happened. Like, when you play like power deck style with Arkham, you just completely just remove all narrative from the game, and it's like, you might as well just play something else at that point.
And I think Reaverman hits it on the head in the chat where he says Arkham isn't a power fantasy, right? Like Marvel is, right? Like, when have you seen superheroes ever hold back, right? Like, it's always like, let's get this bad guy and throw all our powers at them all at once. So, of course, you get, like, that power deck idea. And, Sean, like you said, like, you see a power deck in Arkham, and everyone's kind of like, huh, neat. Anyways, right? Like, and as someone who really enjoys the idea of making really, like, efficient decks, I also, like, there's a tipping point for me where I'm just like, okay, now something is broken, and this is obviously not working the way it's supposed to. It's not just efficient, and it's not just well-tuned, it's... something isn't jiving right? Like, there's an issue with the rules or how things interact, and it's going to get tabooed or fixed, and I'm hoping for that. And I do enjoy playing those broken decks, like, once, like when C-Stan made his remove the encounter deck from the game. I'm like, well, I have to try this because it sounds like a blast. I try it, and I'm like, cool, never playing it again, right? Because it's what's the point of having a game if there's not a game?
And there definitely is a difference to, like, enjoying those sorts of mechanical degeneracies as a thought experiment. But to Chris's credit, C-Stan's credit, like, I know he would never show up to a meetup with one of those decks because that would just be dumb.
Yes.
And frankly, a bit rude. And I know he would never do that. So it's just all about how you approach it and how you talk about it.
Just sit down with that deck. Hey, you guys like Lord of the Rings? Yeah, me neither.
Just take the encounter deck and just push it off the table.
Sir, this is a Wendy's.
Everyone else is like, what?
Yeah. So, I guess one other thing I wanted to ask you guys is maybe talk about it from the other direction. Is there anything that you can think of in Arkham that is maybe too easy or has gotten easier or is maybe bland to the point where you just don't really enjoy engaging with it?
Is it wrong if I say Dunwich just because I've played it so much?
I mean, here's the thing. I'm almost done with my first Achievement Hunter campaign through Dunwich. I'm going to have at least 2 more after this. Mm-hmm. I'm not excited for those other 2. Yeah. So I agree with you, Scott. Yeah, Dunwich, it's good. It's great if you're new to the game. Mm-hmm. Because it, like Ian said earlier, it introduces a lot of what vanilla Arkham is, or what like the foundation you need to then proceed onto further other campaigns in a way that makes sense. I'm
with Urjo on Dunwich. My least favorite part of Dunwich is the delve too deep tax.
Sure.
Like looking back, I know why we were all so fucking gaga on delve too deep. It's because you needed it to build a deck.
Okay, but can you please quote Urjo? Like, if you're going to use his point, please quote him, because Dunwich gives XP like Elon Musk pays taxes.
That was a far better way to say it.
That is true, too. I may not be feeling that part of it as much because I'm running Survivor in this, and so I guess we'll see how my other 2 campaigns play out. But no, I agree. Dunwich is one that, if it sits on the shelf and never gets opened again, I probably won't be sad.
And I think
even Return, like I feel like Return gave Dunwich new life. Personally.
It did, but I don't think
not enough.
I've played that new life.
Yeah, like it gave it new life because it took a lot of the original design points and updated them at the point when Dunwich came out, which would have been around TFA was when Return 2 came out.
Well, if you think about it logistically, Dunwich would have been in playtesting before the game itself even came out.
Well,
so it did very much just feels like an extension of the core set.
Yes, exactly. And I like it. It's a fun campaign. It's just not, I don't get the same experience that I do even from Carcosa so. Mm-hmm.
Well, to me, it's like, it's Halo 1. Like, I love the Halo games. I played the shit out of Halo 1. I'm probably not going to go back and play it. But I loved it.
Sure.
And it was great. But it's okay to leave something behind. Like, and I think with Dunwich being the first one that came out, we get this core set and we're like, oh my god, this game is great. Dunwich, and we just have this insatiable hunger for more Arkham. And everyone played
through that campaign so many times,
right? With like every different investigator that was out trying all these different things. And as there's more and more, like now when you sit down to play Arkham, instead of having one option, there's 7 options, and now those options get played more equally. But Dunwich had a head start, and now I've played Dunwich, I've played the Return to, and I still recommend it as people's first campaign because it teaches you Arkham so brilliantly. But I personally am done with it, but I'm also super okay with being done with it. And I will play it if someone wants to play it, sure. But it's not like I'm not going to be like, hey guys, let's play Dunwich. Like, that's my last suggestion.
One thing I'll throw out there that just kind of occurred to me as we were talking about this, just not necessarily a thing that's gotten easier or whatnot, but like as the game has progressed from a design perspective, now when I see a new investigator that has main class, subclass up to level 2, I'm like, cool.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, like it's cool, and I do like the off class cap at 2. I think that's kind of interesting from a card perspective. But when you compare someone's deck building, when you compare, I don't know, what's a good example? I'm sure I have a good example. Let's compare like Ursula
Mateo
to or like a Mateo. God, Mateo, that's a wild ride. Remember how like mediocre he was when he came out and how bonkers he is now? Like you don't get that ride out of just the main class off class. And I'm glad they exist, and there's some fun combos that you can think of for those ones, but I think the ones that have wacky deck building are more interesting and are more exciting to engage with.
See, and if we get I love Carolyn. I think she's awesome. I think but when I get an investigator that's like Guardian 1 to 5, Survivor 1 to 2, I'm like, oh, thank fucking God. Like, so I can finally relax. Like, I'm occasionally like, oh, I should go back and build a Carolyn deck and give her a fair shake. And then I look at the back of her card and I'm like, fuck that. Like, no thank you, ma'am.
Thank God for Arkham DB, hey?
even still, like, it takes me, I never use DB, so it takes me so long to build a deck on Arkham DB, because I'm such a visual person. I have to see the cards, in front of me, and I have to be able to arrange my deck to be like, put all my clue cards in one stack, all my enemy cards, that sort of thing. And I can't do that with DB, so it just takes me longer. But anyway, yeah, it's just, so I get an investigator like Carolyn or like Marie, and I'm like, I don't fucking know, like, find someone, just build it for me and give me the deck, and then I'll play them.
Can we talk about the difficulty creep of building investigators that have the main class level 0 and then the off class 1 to 5?
Oh my god! You know how many times I've tried to put illegal cards in those fucking investigator decks? The class conflict is so real.
I love the idea of those. I hate the practicality of them. Like, I'm playing Bob a bunch, and I'm just like, I hate deck building for Bob.
Sean, I'm the opposite of you, because I want to, like, I'm playing Lily, or I played Lily, and I'm like, okay, I need to treat her like a guardian. So what mystic cards make sense for a leveled up guardian? And then then I approach it from that angle. But then it's like, I look at the cards, I'm like, none of them! Like, they all want Will! Like, what the fuck? So it's, yeah, I mean, she's not the best example of a clean transition either.
Dude, the amount of times I tried to tell Justin to put the red clock in his Jack deck, I think he was like, Sean, stop.
Just
They
stop.
should have released a second version of each of the investigators that had the proper color on them, and I think that would save us all a lot of trouble. Like, once you level up Monterey, switch to the Seeker version. Like, switch to the yellow card. It still has the rogue symbol, but it's a yellow. It's just a yellow.
He's just wearing a green mask. Truly is the Green Goblin.
I think the one element that I would think of that kind of, I don't know if it's something that was too easy, but maybe too predictable, has kind of been solved for me now with the new release model, is the cycle structure itself. Like, we kind of knew the rhythm of cycles and could structure everything we did accordingly, how we upgrade our decks. Like, okay, scenario 4 is coming up, so we know this is going to be a ball buster. Like, this is this is how we're going to do this. And okay, we know the final scenario is right around the corner. So again, I don't know if that made it easy, predictable, maybe just able to plan things out. But having tackled Edge of the Earth, like, all bets are off with this new release model now, and I think it does freshen things up in terms of, like, the whole campaign. I would agree. Power progression and how, as players, we approach campaigns. So yeah, I'm Edge of the Earth itself is super interesting in that regard, and it feels like Arkham. Not that Arkham was bad before, but I love Arkham. But that this is Arkham reaching its true potential at last. You thought it was good before, but now it's like, this new release model fits it perfectly, and so I'm excited for what's going to come in the future.
Well, I think it also, as far as the power level of encounter sets too, it offers MJ a bigger canvas on that, because there's more cards, and like Sean was talking about, like earlier in the campaigns, that encounter set in scenario 1 has to also be threatening in scenario 7 or something when it comes back, right? Like there has to be that consideration for it. And in these big box sets, I think, like the number of encounter cards, the amount of cards or whatever, like, that's all now hazy, and so it can be way more minuscule or whatnot, and there's just a bigger canvas for that, so the difficulty levels within a campaign can be possibly a bit more balanced.
Right. So I think, to sum up our discussion, we all agree that power creep in Arkham exists.
Yes.
But we all also agree that it is what we would probably classify as a healthy power creep? Question mark?
Yeah, I mean, is it a foregone conclusion that power creep is inevitable?
I think it is inevitable. I think if you're doing a long form game like this that's going to be releasing new content for years and years, I think there's no way around it.
Show me a game that is 3 years or longer that doesn't have power creep.
Right.
But I completely understand Big Kahuna's like fear or concern that like Innsmouth is the new base level, and I don't think it is. I think
Innsmouth just comes out slapping.
Innsmouth gonna Innsmouth.
I think we saw that with Edge of the Earth. Like, as soon as we played Edge of the Earth, we saw that Innsmouth is not the new baseline. You know what I mean? Because Ian brought it up earlier. Edge of the Earth is... It's funny that when we're talking about power creep, we keep going back to Innsmouth and ignoring the newest thing, which has some bad moments, bad as in harder than what we might expect, but overall feels like an easier ride than Innsmouth did.
Yes, and Reaverman brings up the exact point I was going to reference. is that you guys remember the kind of like lowest morale point we had in the game when TFA came out, and then we had a couple of really tough standalones that just completely destroyed us, and there was just a moment of going like, damn, like I can't play this game anymore.
Yeah.
I haven't felt that again since. I think it was just a weird confluence.
Yeah.
I've certainly had moments of salt and been like, really? That needs 3 health?
TCU, I remember some like negative feelings that people were like, ooh, this is tough. Like, TCU is another one that sticks it. TCU is another one where I remember people discussing like, oh man, is the power creep happening, everything like that? And then Dream Eaters came out and everyone's like, okay.
Yep.
So,
well, I mean, one side of the Dream Eaters is considerably harder than the other, but
yeah,
but I can agree with Network though. Guardians of the Abyss standalone is still miserable. Like that is
yes,
especially in higher multiplayer counts. It's just
Egypt
is
is
such a dick punch.
Ooh.
Or,
I don't know
a
if that
punch
one's
in your sensitive genital of choice.
I don't know if that's ever going to not be the high water mark for just like there was a power spike and it was Egypt.
and Sean, you're totally right, because Egypt came out at the same time as TFA. Like
we were in the midst of TFA.
Yeah, so I totally forgot that it was like, that was a scary moment,
wasn't it?
As an Arkham player,
and I just wanted to bring up that I feel like we had that moment, and I think a lot of people shared it with us, but we haven't had a moment like that again, and I think that speaks pretty well to the health of the design.
Agreed.
Yeah, and ultimately, like we've said, power creep is going to happen, and it's fine as long as the power is slowly creeping up and not like a sudden sledgehammer to the face that just keeps pounding you into the ground. Like, it's inevitable, and I would say it needs to happen, but it just needs to be measured. And yeah, as we saw with TFA, if it does go a little bit too high, like there needs to be let's adjust things for the next cycle, which is exactly what we've seen happen. So I think as long as that's the kind of design course that Arkham continues to take, I think we're fine.
Wonderful. Well, good talk. Obviously, there's so much more that we could talk about, but I feel like we covered some good ground here. So let's move it into a little bit of tentacle time, guys. Scott, what's been grabbing you lately?
Oh man, I'll let you guess. It's chess, but also actually Mario Kart. My son has recently gotten decent at Mario Kart. Like he's winning races at 150 cc, which is impressive for a 5-year-old. And not very often. I think he won like twice. But like we can now play together at 100 cc, and
Nice.
I had bought Mario Kart 8 Deluxe or whatever when I bought my Switch, and I kind of played it here and there. But then I realized that there's trophies, and then there's stars, and there's unlockables.
Uh-oh.
And so now I'm really into Mario Kart. And I'm also learning like how to do the little thing where you jump and then you like power slide around corners and it gives you a boost.
And then you learn to snake, where you can do that on straightaways even. Like some people who play Mario Kart are insane.
Yeah.
Oh my god. Now I need to look that up. So anyway, thanks for that.
You're welcome.
So yeah, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. And it's just a really good game. I'm having lots of fun. I've loved Mario Kart since I was a kid. So yep. That and and for Christmas, my wife got me tickets to go see Hamilton. So
Nice. Good for you, man.
Nice.
I am super pumped about that.
Wonderful.
So, she sent it to my email, and in the card, it's just a Christmas card. Open it up. She's like, "I hope you'll be satisfied."
Nice.
And then with a comment or brackets, check your email. So
Cute.
yeah.
Well, fun. Ian, how about you?
It's been a while since I recorded, so there's like so much technical time built up. But I guess the most recent thing is what has both been fun and a mistake, which is getting back into Civilization 6. This is a game that that I usually end up uninstalling from my computer because it's way too addictive for me. But over this most recent vacation period, I have dabbled in. Although this time it has turned into a little bit of a family activity because it's on the Switch. And so we've been like playing hot seat mode and like taking turns going back and forth as a family, which has been kind of fun. So yeah, I've been diving back into Civilization 6 and oh boy, the rabbit hole runs deep with that game. That's one of my favorite games of all time, but it's also way too addicting. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. Well, we got to start the timer for when I ultimately have to uninstall it again.
Man, I have stayed away from Civilization simply because of that reputation it has. Like, I put hundreds of hours into the handheld versions of Final Fantasy Tactics just because of like that kind of gameplay loop just sucks me in. So, oh man.
I think it's fun though. I think it's just like the 4X game problem in general, just the one more turn, like I gotta see how this war is gonna go or when my next technology I'm gonna reach, and
fun. Nick, how about you?
Christmas. Okay, so I've been playing Descent. I got my copy of Descent in the mail a few weeks ago. I'm 3 scenarios in, I think. 3, I think. Really fun. Really fun.
Don't skip over the part where you're like in the credits and shit.
Well, I'm actually not credited in the book.
Oh no? Okay, well.
So I was good. But yes, I did work on it. And I did play through a couple of the events that I wrote, and it was kind of fun to see that. But it is really fun. I had nothing to do with the actual game mechanics side of it. But if anyone has the opportunity to play it, I suggest you do. It is a campaign-only game, obviously, as I'm sure everybody's aware. So you can't just pick it up and play a scenario and then be like, that's fun. It's all about the story and the characters. But those characters are great, and the story's fun. And the gameplay mechanics are really awesome as well, like the flipping cards and when do you flip this card and when do you not, and that sort of thing. That's really cool. And the app controlling a lot of upgrades, so you can do a lot of little minute upgrades to your weapons. Like if you have a sword, you can choose the hilt and choose the blade, and there's different hilts and blades that do different things. And of course, one of them says like, this blade has a 20% chance to do da-da-da-da-da. And it's like, well, shit, no, the app does it all for you, and it'll just be like, hey, your thing triggered, so now this happens. And it's like, oh, cool. So that's really fun. So Descent is great.
I've heard some people, the talk about board games that have app integration is like how much app is too much app. You think it's a good balance?
I do. My only other experience with an app assisted board game is XCOM. And both this and XCOM, you need the app for it. My only criticism with Descent, and Brandon from Optimal Play and friend of the show Casey and I have talked about this at length. But my only issue with the app is that is the only way the narrative is displayed to the player is via the app, and it's very dialogue heavy. The story beats are, which is cool. It's really awesome to see dialogue between characters. But that means you have to be paying attention to the screen. You have to be clicking through that in between scenarios and stuff like that, or when you do these little side events that I wrote. And it's a different. It has a different rhythm to it than if you were just playing, like say Arkham, and you're reading it out of the book. You know what I mean? So it takes some getting used to. I don't think that Descent has too much app. To answer your question in a much more succinct and way that I probably should have answered it beforehand. I don't think it has too much app. I think it is still good. It's still really fun. And when you're actually playing it, like playing through a scenario on your table, the only thing you really use the app for is when you're like, okay, I'm going to target this thing and do this action. You just select the thing on the app and say what you're doing. So it still feels like a tabletop game. But it benefits from a larger screen. So if you have a tablet or something like that, then obviously it'll play better with that. I unfortunately only have my phone, and so I am constantly holding that thing inches from my face and squinting and feeling like I'm 65 years old.
Better get those readers, baby.
Right, I do. Although oh my god, I'm just realizing my phone has a stylus, and that would solve so many of my issues. So anyway. Descent is great. If you have the opportunity to play it. Sean, I'll be bringing it when we get together in January.
Was just gonna ask.
The only downside is that it's 4-player max. So I will probably be sitting out while you all play it, which is fine with me. Because I have other stuff. I'm bringing role-playing stuff. I can play DS3 on your PlayStation, that sort of thing.
Well, you can take advantage of my short attention span. Maybe you and I can swap seats once in a while.
Sure, sure. There's that too. The other thing that I've done recently is I finally completed Mass Effect 3. It's my second time beating Mass Effect 3. It's my first time playing through all 3 games in a row with one character. I've never done that before, so that was really fun. I got the synthesis ending, which is if you're
green.
A developer of... Yeah, it's green. Suddenly green everywhere, which was kind of a cool change because everything is so red and blue in that color scheme for that series. But if you develop Mass Effect, then it is the good ending. At least that's definitely how the narrative and the ending scene kind of made you believe. But if you talk to some people who thought about it, it may not be the good ending. So there's that as well. And after I beat Mass Effect 3, I had a moment where I was like, do I go back and redo it and play it through and make significant different choices and all that? And I thought about that for a second, and then I thought about having to replay Mass Effect 1, and I promptly uninstalled the Legendary Edition from my PlayStation, because I don't want to go back to Mass Effect 1.
God, I wish Mass Effect 3 had the multiplayer ported across. I put as
That
many
would be
hours
fun.
into that as I did into actually playing that game.
It is that the multiplayer was really fun. But so that what I did do after I uninstalled Mass Effect Legendary Edition was then I reinstalled Andromeda, and I was like, I didn't give Andromeda, and I talked to you guys about this beforehand. I didn't give Andromeda a fair shake because the characters didn't grab me like the ones in the original Mass Effect. I think I played it for like 3 hours and then uninstalled it. So I'm going to force myself to get a minimum of 10 hours in. And if at 10 hours I don't feel like it's worth continuing, then I will quit and uninstall. But I'm hoping that by that point I will be invested enough in the gameplay and everything and the narrative that I will finish it. So
What I would just caveat for anyone who's going to hop into Andromeda, I don't think that either the story or the characters are going to grab you in the same way that the original trilogy did.
sure.
It feels like a spiritual successor to the first one, where it's a lot about like
Right.
exploring new terrain and finding like world hazards and enemies. So if you really kind of shift your focus to enjoying exploration and combat primarily, you'll probably be a little bit more apt to not fall off.
I used to be very, like, when I replayed Mass Effect 2 over and over and over again for those couple years, I was very much like, skip through this dialogue shit, get me to the combat. Like, come on, let's do it. And in this playthrough, when I played through 1 through 3, I was like, God, another combat encounter? Come on, can I just get back to just chatting with Javik, please?
Yeah.
So I don't know. We'll see where I land with Andromeda.
Yeah. Well, fun. For my part, I have, the holidays have been busy, but I have primarily been playing in my non-Arkham gaming time a little PS5 exclusive called Returnal.
Yes!
And it was highly, highly suggested to me by Justin and by MJ. It was very, very fun and confusing to listen to them talk about the game in a spoiler-free way around me when we saw each other for the what was the last event we did? The
Arkham Knights?
Yeah, the Arkham Knights that we did. I went to Arkham Knights. I keep forgetting that.
There was Arkham Knights.
I
keep
know
forgetting
there
that.
was Arkham Knights. Anyway, it's a really fun, like, sci-fi alien planet mindfuck roguelite where basically you have a static spawn point and you keep trying to progress through the world. You're finding new guns. You're finding like modifiers that increase your gameplay. And it's also the first 3D third-person shooter bullet hell game that I've ever played. And that has been interesting. So anyway, I just recently beat the game in that I like got through all the levels and beat the final, the last in sequence boss as far as I know. I'm still not 100% sure what the fuck is happening in that game. It takes a very, very like Memento / Dark Souls approach toward its narrative. So I'm still figuring things out. I have some working theories. But there's still a bunch of like side stuff to unlock, and it would surprise me if there's not like a secret boss that I haven't seen. I haven't looked at any of like the online stuff or anything, so I'm still just going on my own hunches here. But anyway, really, really fun game. It's a PS5 exclusive, so I'm probably speaking to a very small crowd at the moment. But if it ever does expand to PC or any other systems, like grab it. It is a ridiculously fun game, very engaging, very hard. It's got a couple walls where I almost quit, even as someone who enjoys smacking my head up against things for a time. But yeah, Returnal, highly, highly recommended. All right, well, guys, I think that's enough for us for episode 120 of Mythos Busters. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you guys next time.